So thank you so much. I already saw one hand go up. We have mics on both sides of the room, so please proceed to the mic if you have a question. Maybe we can start with DJ De Jesus.
First of all, thank you very much for our guest speakers. I'm always delighted when my biases are confirmed. I think over the last 3 years, what has been impressed most forcefully upon us is that our education problems lie very far upstream in the basic education sector. Unfortunately, the private sector is not very well positioned to address this problem directly, because our basic education sector is not fragmented at all. It is in fact highly concentrated, with 95% of basic education students in the state sector. Where I think the private sector can make a difference is in the area of teacher education, which is still perhaps one of the top 4 programs in terms of enrollment. And therefore, what I'd like to ask our speakers to share is perhaps your thoughts on what the private sector, what initiatives the private sector education institutions can do in terms of introducing innovations in the teacher training for the basic education sector. Thank you.
Thank you, EDJ. Who'd like to take? Kavita, maybe you can start, then Meekyung can follow up.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for the question. I think you're absolutely right. Learners are one half of the system, and teachers are really where we need to be concentrating our efforts. I think there's a couple of things that we need to consider overall. One is the pre-service education for teachers adequate for their first day in the classroom? And unfortunately, a lot of our teacher colleges are not preparing them for that. They're very theoretical. They do focus on pedagogy and principles of education, but they're not necessarily giving them the hands-on experience they need to go into a classroom and work with 43-year-olds, right? So I think there needs to be innovation in how the teacher capacity is developed in the first place. The second is usually after pre-service training, in-service training for teachers drops fairly significantly. And I think we need to see a pattern of more accreditation happening, which a lot of our systems don't have. They assume, in India, we assume that if you have your bachelor's in education and you got that degree 20 years ago, you're good to go for the rest. So I think we need to have a constant way of monitoring teacher capacity, building in-service programs, and this can be done fairly easily using technology, right? Are we even assessing what our teachers know before they go in and teach? And I think, so the example of Bridge that I spoke, they have a very centralized, structured teaching manual that they give their teachers. And I think that's important as well, because often a lot of our teachers don't have the skills to prepare lesson plans. They don't have the skills to manage classrooms. So let's make those initial years in the classroom a bit easier for teachers and help them upskill as they continue in their teaching career.
Meekyung?
Okay. Thank you for great questions. When we categorize the education level with the enrollments, in case of elementary school or secondary school, 90% is we call it universal education. Especially the primary education, we prefer equal opportunities. Students, if we have a proper education for more than 90%, a significant portion is very good. I think recommendable. But in case of teacher training is not that matter. So it's good if we can teach well and they trained very well. And then regardless of the private or private institute, if we find the good talent students from society and then train them appropriately, then I think it's not the matter of a private can teach well or public teacher school can teach well. And in case teachers, we used to say that teachers' quality is the most important, crucial factor if we want to have a high quality teacher, and then we have to get young talent who have a skill and very dedication for education, and then we have to provide the we have the working condition they can provide. So it's school environment, and then their salary level, everything, and incentive system to promotion is all, everything are considered to get the talented students, to invite the talented student to education sector, and then let them stay longer. Yeah.
So the importance of pre-service and in-service training, and how to attract the better students to go to the teaching profession. Yes, please. Can you please state your name and affiliation for the benefit also of our speakers? Although many of us know each other here, I think our speakers would like to understand who's asking the question. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Peter. I'm Justine from Philippine Business for Education. So my question is actually anchored or taken from Kavita's presentation. So you mentioned in your work in GSF, you've had ministries investing with non-state schools or organizations at scale. Have you had experience in other contexts where you have government not willing to invest or kind of wary of investing in private education, but then eventually shifted or started to collaborate? And if so, what was the tipping point?
Oh, that's a very good question about the tipping point. So I think in most countries that we work with, and what we see is there is the initial reluctance to start working with non-state actors, because if you ask parents who is responsible for basic education, they will say the government, right? And therefore the governments also feel that their responsibility is very high to provide basic education for the children that they're working with. I think tipping point comes with capacity. The governments just don't have the capacity to think about projects at scale. Tipping points come in when there's funding on the table, when non-state organizations are able to bring in funding partners who will help them implement, leverage government funding, right? A lot of these partnerships use government infrastructure, work with government teachers, but also there is a little bit of funding to support enhancements of the program. So I think that is really key. But honestly, I think most governments are still testing these partnerships. I don't think they're fully convinced across the world. I think it really depends on where the non-state organization is able to add value. Governments work a lot with technical advisors who are helping them develop curriculum, content, teacher training, etc. So they test out small projects before they're able to hand over larger kind of partnerships to non-state actors. But I think it's interesting to see how much governments are thinking about data right now, and they are using data to make decisions on when they need to bring non-state actors into the fold. So it's a bit of a challenge anywhere that we work, but I think capacity is really strained within a lot of ministries of education, and therefore they're realizing that partnering is more effective than building that capacity in-house.
Meekyung, would you like to chime in on that question? Okay, so Meekyung is okay. Okay, there's one already there on the, again, please state your name, and then we'll go to Mr. Ansaldo here after.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bons Magsambal from Rappler. So you didn't touch on this, but it's been like a heated discussion on social media. What are your thoughts on adopting artificial intelligence in the education sector? And what are the safeguards that institutions need to protect academic integrity?
Tough question. Meekyung, would you like to take that on? Artificial intelligence in education.
I'm sorry. Can you ask again without mask. I'm still difficult to understanding clearly.
Do I need to repeat my question?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, hold on. Okay, yeah. So basically my question is, what are your thoughts on adopting artificial intelligence or AI in the education sector, and what are the safeguards that institutions need to protect academic integrity?
Yes, AI. Yes,
AI.
it's a very important issue. Yes, yes. With the AI, actually we can achieve the individualized, customized education. So it gave us really potential to support in every one by one student. So using the high technology, using that technology is in education sector is I think is really important. And then in case of South Korea government government said they started making the AI system to support student learning, and they provided the feedback customized for students. And then, as you mentioned that, but this kind of system is some people we know the concern and then risky. So instead of this AI education system developed by private sector, actually the government side had an initiative and then prepare the kind of that kind of challenges, and then the security issues, if they deal with it together, it's much better sustainable and a safe way to using AI technology more fast, I think.
So I think Meekyung is saying that it would be good if private again and government can collaborate on developing the directions forward on AI instruction. So yeah, again, another challenge, and I think that was part of Kavita's presentations also, no, on innovation and our call for innovation. Again, working together,
yes.
Public and private sector. Which brings me to that point of complementarity.
Yes.
We hear that word a lot.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have additional thoughts on complementarity. What would be some very practical ways to push for complementarity? Maybe what you've experienced in the work you've done or in your country on complementarity.
Yes, move to the Kavita's ideas. Yes, that you mentioned about very important point. Yes, so, but even if AI technology, I said that the government involvement is very important to protect the information issues, personal information, things that. But usually the technology is from the private sector, and they are more faster than to adopt the new technology. So definitely we need that work together. Yes, that working the private sector and the public sector is very important to our more reliable and efficient system for students. Okay.
Kavita, would you like to?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Ms. Shin on the fact that AI will allow for personalized learning. But in basic education, I think it's still and nice to have add-on at the moment, especially for some of the demographics that we're working with, which is rural populations in the bottom 2 quintile of each country, which means that they don't necessarily have access to technology. I think the one thing that the pandemic did show us was that technology really didn't drive learning effects, right? So we haven't in the past couple of years with hybrid education and blended learning models seen a spike. So I think we can use AI to differentiate, to provide enhancement and remedial support for children that potentially need it. But I do think it can also support teachers themselves, and it has to be highly monitored. I think child safeguarding is a huge issue, and I think you kind of like touched upon it in asking this question. But I think given AI and the world of possibilities that it opens, we need to start thinking about child safeguarding very differently. And I don't think, I've seen too many organizations do that at the moment, but I do think it's a really critical thing before we introduce any kind of technology.
Yes, Kavita pointed out very important point, said that actually teachers are really important factors. So I wish, when I worked in the ministry, I wish that I want to give AI secretary to all the teachers. So teachers do so many tedious administrative and evaluation things. So many, they took that, they spend so much time with that kind of work. So when we developers are thinking about the AI program for support students, we'd better think about how support teachers to do well, and they let them spend their time more genuinely or more valuably with a communication or interaction with the student. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Who do we go? Is it Bobby first or the lady? Okay, Bobby, can we take Bobby first since I?
Good afternoon. I'm Bobby Ansaldo. I sit on two boards. The first is the Cagayan de Oro College of the PHINMA Educational Network, and I also sit on the board of the Apo Palungguan Cultural Educational Center for Lumad, or indigenous children, in Bukidnon. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the leadership of the PHINMA Educational Network for putting this together and stressing the need for private sector, public sector, and civil society to get together to solve this. Okay, I would like to, allow me to ask the resource persons whether they would have any experience, for example, in addressing in the Philippines the least and the lost in Philippine society, who are the indigenous tribes living up in the mountains. And there is really an urgent need for this, because records of DAR and NCIP, National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, say that 40% of the arable lands in the country today are in the hands of the indigenous tribes, 40%. And there's an urgent need to educate and capacitate them to access capital in order to develop their ancestral domain, plant high-value trees, and achieve for the country income generation and poverty reduction, preservation of the watersheds that we depend on for our water security, at the same time improving peace and order in the countryside. Any of your comments would be appreciated. Thank you.
Can I ask Kavita to take that question?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation to try and provide a solution to. But I think there are challenges into education, but I think the first is to really think about that community as being very different, I'm assuming, from the rest of the Philippines. And therefore, what are their challenges? What are their aspirations in some sense? I think with communities that are indigenous, that are potentially isolated from the rest of the country, it needs to be a whole community approach. And we've seen organizations do that. We've seen organizations who say, if this community needs to thrive, then education, nutrition, water, safety, working with women, all becomes critical. So I think it becomes a much more comprehensive program for indigenous communities. The example that I shared from Guatemala, Maya Impact, faces very similar issues in that Mayan girls had the least education attainment in the entire country. So they have targeted specifically girls. They work with feeder schools who then send their girls to secondary education. They do specific things. They have a bridge program, for example, for girls to go through before they join secondary education, just to make sure that they've got some of the foundational skills that they need. They have a much more holistic approach. So it's not just academic knowledge, but it's what are some of your social-emotional skills that you need? How do you engage families and communities much more in the school? And I think more than anything else, they look at who are your role models. The indigenous community often doesn't have any role models from within the indigenous community. So how do you identify nurture people within that community that are doing well, build leadership within your schools that is indigenous. It's going to take much longer, right? But having indigenous leaders who understand what they need on the ground has been really critical. So Maya's leadership team is 100% indigenous, and I think 95% women. So it really makes a difference for the communities that you're working for. But I think that whole school approach, the whole community approach is really critical when you're working with our community.
Thank you, Kavita. We had one more lady. Where's the... We can start with you, then we'll go to you, okay? We'll shift to the other side of the room. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenica from the Manila Times, Business Times. You mentioned that quality education is very important, most especially quality of teaching to both children and teachers. Following the pandemic, international institutions, organizations are pushing for digitalization. Example, the hybrid system of education, both face-to-face and virtual. How are we going to address that to both teachers and students, most especially to marginalized area, to still provide quality of education?
If I understand your question correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, are you asking about the past 2 years there's been a focus on technology, but how do we go back to the basics? How do we really focus on quality? Is that your question? Using technology or in classrooms?
Using technology, because following the pandemic, organizations and most especially in the Philippines are pushing for digitalizations or the use of technologies in terms of learning face-to-face or most especially the virtual learning. So how are we going to address that to still provide quality of education to students?
Shin, do you want to?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, through this hybrid and online and hybrid education, then still we have many reasons and have a difficulty to have a device and then the communication service. So many countries has that realized the problem of the kind of disparities. So they supported the device and then they negotiated with the communication service company about the for education purpose, more lower price kind of thing. So at least the studying environment, government needs to try more invest. Every student can access to the material on the online, or sometimes the technology startup developed the device that they can use without data or kind of without data, a special device. So that kind of with better using the technology more proactively for support better the marginalized students. Actually, Philippine education DepEd has a very high alternative education system. So they equipped all the curriculum, the middle school level curriculum on the online, and then they can finish their study through the online. I watched that the video and materials very high quality. So using the digital technology is more actively the way to support the marginalized students. And if we pay attention, if they are get the privileged that device or environment.
Thank you.
Yes. Kavita?
Yeah, I was going to say, technology can be used in multiple ways in the education system. It's not just in classrooms with learners. I think technology can help us achieve efficiencies across the board, whether it's in the use of data collection, right? Like we're seeing a lot of governments in India where teachers are putting in data on apps. It reduces their time on task. It gives you better data with which to make information. So how are we using technology there? How are we using technology to improve teacher capacity? and then thinking about how we using technology with learners. It's very similar to the AI question that was asked. Most families don't have access to smartphones or digital devices. And so we saw in the pandemic actually, radio programming, TV programming was really high. We went back to the basics. We said, let us use radio because it is vastly used by rural communities. How do we use radio? How do we use SMS? Just what do we have available on feature phones? It's how do you use IVR? So if a child presses a number, they asked questions that will help them with remediation, that will help. You can do simple things with simple technology that will enhance learning. So I think before we even think about innovation in the way that education is thought about, I would say let's use technology for some of the basics, use technology that's going to drive efficiencies, and then think about where technology can enhance current learning strategies that are already in place.
Thanks, Kavita. I'm being signaled here that we have very little time left. So we go to that side of the room. Ma'am, please ask your question. By the way, the Manila Times, please ask that question again later at the press con, because we have folks from PHINMA Education who might have very good answers to that question also. Go ahead. Your name, please.
Hi, my name is Angela Chen Dilantar, and I'm the CEO of Esquelabs. We are an education technology company one of the entrepreneurs, I think Meekyung mentioned, and we build live cohort learning experiences to upskill people in the future of work. And we work with some of the universities here actually to prepare their graduating students for better employment outcomes. So my question is actually around innovation. I know you talked a lot about technology already, whether it's in technology or funding models. A lot of the presentation, I think, was about one sector, one party not doing it alone. And I know, Kavita, you mentioned this Brookings report that highlighted 3,000 education innovations globally, and that was from 2018. So I did a quick search to see how many of them are from the Philippines, and there were only 6, or 0.02% of those 3,000. So I'm wondering, because both of you are really at a vantage point to see a lot of innovation both in the region and globally, what is one innovation that you are very excited about today and would hold the most promise for the Philippines? Thank you.
A really good question. I don't know if I have an answer. So give me a second.
Meekyung, would you like to start? What one innovation do you think?
Okay, and then I can add if you think again. Yesterday I was really shameful experience. I have not met many experts in Philippines. So when I invited yesterday, the dinner I mentioned, I brought my business card, paper business card. And then I gave our Chino and professors, and then they said that, for sustainable development, we don't use a paper business card anymore. And then he showed the QR code. It was shocked. And I think the Philippines innovation level is really high. And then, as we mentioned, the AI technology, and most of the AI speak English. So English-speaking countries has very high privilege if we make the situation, make the environment, and give more opportunity for students. And what did I make? Preparing the presentation parts. When I worked in the ADBs, Philippines, we don't have much project in Philippine higher education, so I had not many chance to how Philippine research status, innovation status, but on the data they are really quite improving. And so with this momentum, young generations and then more innovative people focusing on educating high quality technology, then Philippines can jump on the one more jump to innovation and education. And actually, the accepting the new technologies is not the order of countries. So Korea was doing also in 1990 we established the internet older school for the first time. So school was the best place to using the internet. And then I've heard that Estonia is another country. So I hope in Philippines we can see another new innovative initiative can happen in the education sector. Thank you.
Kavita?
Yeah, I'm going to say two things actually. One is the type of innovation that excites me personally in education is process innovation and business model innovation, right? So are we leveraging groups of people that we haven't before? So the mamapreneur model that I talked about, where they work with women to run small centers, it's literally 3 children in your home paying a very minimal fee, but is giving the woman and the child an experience that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So how are we tapping into existing populations, creating business model solutions? I think that for me is an innovation that can really leapfrog. And the second, which I think is critical for any country, not just the Philippines, is work readiness. So in India, we're seeing students coming out of engineering colleges without the skills necessary to do their job. And I'm assuming it's similar here, right? So how are we preparing learners for the future? How are we preparing them to hit their jobs running from day one? And that's really looking at things like communication and confidence and ability to form partnerships and collaborate and discuss. And I think those need to be built into our education system a lot more.
Okay, thank you, Kavita. Thank you, Meekyung. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this forum. I'd like to remind our friends in media that we do have a small conference, press conference right after. I think our ushers will lead you to that room.